Hi, Jesse, and welcome to Cardboard Conversations. It's great to have you around, and we're loving to hear a little more about sorcery and how you're going to manage having sorcery in your store. So, would you like to tell us a little more about yourself and your LGS here in Australia?
Sure. Yes, it's good to be here, and apologies for the baby crying in the background if that's coming through the mic,
We
but
have kids too.
hopefully that won't last too long. Yeah, no, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me along, and thanks for taking the time to have a chat. I'm Jesse. I live in Melbourne, Australia, and I have a channel called The Winning Agenda where I do some sorcery content and those sorts of things, and the local game store here that I'm involved with is Plenty of Games, which is a store in the city in Melbourne. And it's I guess a bit of background on the store itself. It's a bit different to most local game stores in that there's a wide range of people who are part of it. So it's more of a collective than some local game stores, I suppose. So there's about, I think from memory, about 30 different people who have a stake in the store. So it's sort of a lot more distributed in that way. And then there are a core group of 4 guys who kind of take care of the store day to day, which is nice. So I'm not one of the people who's there day to day. I've got another day job. But being a part of the collective and a part of the group, I suppose I have that connection to the store that way. And I've taken on the role of trying to grow the sorcery community because it's a game that I'm particularly passionate about. In the past, I've been involved in some other games. So I've played Fab competitively for a couple of years before the baby came along. And then didn't have time to really commit to doing that anymore. And before that, our store has only been open for about a year now. Just coming up on 12 months soon. Before that, I was involved as a player rather than someone involved with the store in the Android Netrunner community. So that was actually when we started the Winning Agenda as a channel. It's actually a pun about Android Netrunner, where your objective is to score agendas to win the game. So yeah, we used to do a weekly podcast actually under the Winning Agenda name, me and a group of other local players, and did a lot of work trying to build that scene locally. So that's kind of my background. I also played Magic as well and have been involved in that community for a while. And one of the guys who is one of the more core people, the core owners of our local game store now, Plenty of Games that I'm involved with. He is an old friend of mine who used to run a different game store as well in Melbourne. So we also played Fab together, and that's Isaac. Shout out to Isaac, who's also appeared on a few of my videos. So yeah, that was back when I was a late teenager in uni. I used to always go along to Isaac's old store, Metagames, when that was around, and play Magic in my youth. So that's my history with card games, I suppose.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, that's quite a rich history in card games.
Yeah,
Definitely. And I love the sort of collective community around having a game store. I think that must really help out because then you can sort of like you take charge on sorcery and then some other people do other games. And I imagine that would be really helpful to the core group of 4 guys running that store.
Yeah, it's really great. So, some of the people in the broader ownership group are more involved than others. Some people just wanted to be a part of the store and just have a stake in it, and that's fine. But and not really sort of come in and champion any particular games. But I'd say most of the people who are in that group have for some of them, it's a particular Magic format that they love, and they'll help organize the tournaments for that. For some people, it's a small indie card game that they're just really passionate about. And for others, it's just coming along to the bigger Magic events and things like that and helping out when they can. So yeah, it's really great to have a broad group of people to draw from, and also that core group of people who's their day to day doing the mechanics, who we all know and trust, and are sure that the shop's in safe hands in that way.
Yeah, nice. So if we start at the beginning with sorcery, where did you hear about the game and what made you decide to go ahead and pledge the Kickstarter?
Well, one of the great things about having been involved in both Android Netrunner and Flesh and Blood previously is that Team Covenant and Zach in particular, and Stephen as well, have both been very passionate about both of those games. So I actually met Zach and Stephen originally through the Android Netrunner community, and they used to come along to the World Championships for Android Netrunner most years and do commentary and play. Zach's brother Tim also played against him in the first Worlds that I went over to America for. He's a lovely guy. Shout out to Tim Bunn. And so they've all done, the group of them at Team Covenant have done a lot of content, which I've loved over the years. And they were actually one of the reasons that I took the plunge into Flesh and Blood as well, because they were so passionate about that. And they were doing their weekly streams through lockdown. What was lockdown for us and what was COVID for lots of other people, perhaps with varying degrees of lockdown. And then when I was just perusing their channel one day and saw that they were doing a sorcery stream, I think it was just before the Kickstarter or just after the Kickstarter had begun, I was hooked. Yeah, I thought it looked fantastic and had a lot going for it.
So what kind of hooked you on sorcery? Was it the art or the gameplay or a combination?
I think it was, you see, particularly over the last 2 to 3 years, there have been so many new TCGs come out in the Kickstarter space, but also just broadly. And when you're evaluating them and thinking about whether they look like something you'd want to play, there are lots of different things that you look at based on your, the things you enjoy. So I'm not so much of sort of an anime art fan, not so much of a big shiny things and sort of crazy shapes and lots going on the card, visual clutter. I like a bit of simplicity and elegance in the way the cards look. So, Flesh and Blood's got that to an extent. They, I think James White spent a lot of time perfecting the borders of the different cards, having really distinctive look to each of the different factions so that initial eye appeal and ability to tell things apart was really good from the borders. And then, of course, you slot in the artwork into that and it all works together as a cohesive piece. And that eye appeal is something that's definitely important to me. I want things that look mature in a way, not so much of a wow, giant color bomb excitement, that kind of stuff. Something that's a bit more adult, I guess, and mature in the way it looks. So immediately when I saw the sorcery cards, the layout being borderless and having the art full bleed across the card, the way the artwork is of really varying styles, but all with a cohesive look. All the things that Eric's talked about in his art direction and the way that he wanted the game to look, to have that real sense that the artists brought their own personalities to the pieces, but the hand-painted nature of it all and the fantasy nature of it all gives it, strangely enough, despite all that diversity, an overall cohesive look to it. But it also means that when you look at any particular card and any new card, it can surprise you because the artist brought their own personality to it. So I really liked that. I liked the full bleed. I liked the hand-painted art. And I liked the layout of the cards. That's kind of the first step. And then watching the Team Covenant guys playing the game, I thought the grid-based idea, as someone who's also, my first job as a teenager was working in a war game store for Games Workshop, who make Warhammer. And so I've always loved sort of strategy games and tactical games and war games. And I think as a grid-based TCG where movement on the board is important and positioning is important, and you have, things that only have a particular range or can only target particular spots on the board, it really has a lot of those wargaming elements as well and those strategy game elements. So it's almost a TCG that crosses over with board games and war games as well and brings in elements of each of those. And I thought that was really cool. And almost role-playing games too. I've spoken to some of my friends who love D&D and said this is kind of wargaming, D&D, board games and card games all rolled into one. That's pretty ambitious and pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. And also having like the whole narrative, because there isn't like an in-game lull, you sort of get to develop the story as you attack with different monsters and creatures and, really enact the, role of being that avatar. I really think that's a really cool aspect to it as well.
Yeah, and as I sort of started looking at the Discord and keeping an eye on sort of what Eric was discussing at the time, he was then just sort of doing the final pass, or what proved not quite to be the final pass, through the cards and amending the language, amending some of the type lines, correcting some of the typos and things like that. And I could tell from the way he engaged in that process that he was someone who really wanted to create something that was high quality, that didn't have errors and mistakes in it, but also someone who took great pride in the way he used words and the way he used the limited space on each of the cards and he wanted to be proud of each of them. And I thought that was a really great thing for a creator of a game to have that much passion for it. And I think that comes through in the little deft touches, and the curios are a great way to look back in time at where
Yeah.
things have come from and how much effort has gone into getting it to the final resting place where it is now, or the finished product. But think little deft touches like the type line, having the rarity and a bit of flavor and a description of that's a bit evocative about what the story the card's trying to tell you, I think is really cool.
Yeah, I think it's both really cool but also really original. The idea of not having some sort of rarity symbol somewhere isn't really something I've seen otherwise done, and I really enjoyed. And as you said, the curios, it's very cool to look back and see, okay, at one point it was a lot more cluttered, and somehow the process was not making it more and more complex. It was just zooming in on what's important, what is really beautiful about these cards, and how do we make it as simple as possible, and I assume also as easy to play as possible. That's really been fun to like see those differences.
Yeah, and I think the other aspect to that, from what I've seen from Eric, is he listens to people's feedback, but he's also got a very strong idea of the parameters within which he wants the game to operate and the features he wants it to have. Because, we've got a huge community and a range of people coming from different games who all have things that they like and things they don't like, and they're all different, and a lot of them conflict. And he, as the person in charge of designing the game and developing it in a way, at least up to this point, obviously he's got more stuff now, but it has largely been his project. He has to make the call on each of those things, on every single card, what the ability is, what the rules do, what the mana cost is, and trying to create a fun game, what every ability word does.
Yeah.
And that's a huge amount of responsibility. And I think he has executed that really well by having a clear idea of how he wants the game to feel, how he wants the game to look, and really listening to feedback from playtesters. And the delay in the Kickstarter and the fact that we ended up doing that extra round of playtesting, if you look at where the game was then in sort of September last year compared to what actually went to print in sort of January time, the game was 100% better. Like, it was doubly as good and doubly as fun and doubly as tight. And it would have been easy for a creator like Eric, who'd already spent so many years on it, to think it was good enough. And he had the time pressure on him to get the Kickstarter delivered. But the fact that he took the time to say, I think we can do better, and then actually did, that's pretty cool.
That's really cool because we haven't been a part of the playtesting process. So maybe you could say just like a few key points you think really improved from September and to the finished product.
Sure. So when there was sort of a funny game that I played, which I recorded, and I think Simon sent me a message saying that the team really enjoyed watching the game, because I built like a Death Speaker deck with a range of things, just sort of put in all the Genesis abilities that I could to try and make maximum use of Death Speaker's ability. And at the time, Cauldron Crones was a 1 cost, now it costs 3. And it was, so 1 cost Genesis, you may sacrifice a friendly minion here to draw a card. And then there was a card called Miracle Workers, which is now when it Genesis, return a minion from your cemetery to your hand if it died this turn. It used to be return the minion from the cemetery to the battlefield if it died this turn, or to the realm, into play. So what you could do is things like you'd have a Grandmaster Wizard or a Apprentice Wizard even on a Geistwood. So the Genesis ability is also a Deathrite ability. And you'd play the Cauldron Crones for 1, sacrifice the wizard. So its Genesis would draw you card, either 1 or 3 cards, depending which wizard. The Cauldron Crones also draws you a card from its ability. And then you play Miracle Workers for 2 and return the wizard to play. You get the wizard's Genesis ability to draw cards. And then you play another Cauldron Crones, sack the wizard again to draw more cards. So it was a few turns, sort of maybe turn 7 or 8. So it wasn't immediately, but you get to this position where you can draw your whole deck relatively easily with that combination of things. And then, it's just a matter of assembling some kind of combination of things to kill your opponent once you've got your whole deck in your hand. So it was things like that. I mean, that's super fun as the person playing it, but you probably don't want things that powerful and combos that easy in your core game. You want to make things a bit more challenging for players. The other one was it was relatively easy with the way that the mixers and the cores were designed at the time. They were called something different at the time. I think they were mixers and perfects or something back then.
Yeah.
But the ramp was basically so efficient that you had ramp that cost 0 and gave you an extra mana, and then you had things that cost 0 or they might have cost 1 that you could sacrifice what is now the mixers to gain extra mana. And you could get to a situation where you had so much mana on turn 5 or 6 that you could then play Doomsday Prophet, which doubles magic damage, and the direct damage spells were much easier to target at that point at your opponent's avatar. So you could play like a summoning sphere to put your Doomsday Prophet next to their avatar, and then play enough direct damage spells to get them from 20 to 0, because you really only need to deal 10 because Doomsday Prophet doubles the damage. And you could do that all in one turn relatively easily, relatively consistently. So that whole strategy was neutered in a way because you had the mixers become less reliable. They can now only work on spells of their element. You had the cores now cost 1 mana rather than 0. So they're a little bit slower. All of the direct damage spells, not only were they a little bit degenerate in that strategy, but they were way too easy to kill your opponent when they're at death's door. Because they were all way too easy to target. So all of them were given, or most of them, were given either a proximity restriction or a randomness element. So like Lightning Bolt only hits a random unit on the target site rather than a specific unit, which it used to try and make it a bit harder to just snipe the opposing avatar at death's door from across the battlefield. And Doomsday Prophet, as a particular card example, which was a bit too strong, was shifted up to unique rarity and made cost a little bit more. So all those little bits of feedback that came through from the playtest group and things that people found were just a bit too strong and were pushing out other strategies, particularly other minion-based strategies. Eric made tweaks and changes. Eric and the team, Rafa and Belief as well, worked really hard in that period on those things. And I think what they've ended up with a couple of exceptions like Grapple Shot, is a card pool that's really well balanced and encourages lots and lots of different strategies, which we've seen through the league.
Yeah, absolutely. So we haven't played anything yet. We're trying to sort of go into this blind and just start out with some cardboard and sort of get the hang of it. But if you are going to sort of sell this game to someone who is new to TCGs in general, how would you explain it, or what would you say are like the key things they need to know about to get started and or sort of like make it sound attractive? What are like the good parts of the game?
Yeah, so when I'm trying to get my friends to come down to our release event, so we've scheduled a sealed release event, which is if you're running a local game store or if you're in a local community, I recommend that as a way, firstly, to get people in. Sealed is really easy because people can just pay the entry fee and they get the 6 packs to build their deck. So there's very little that they need to do beforehand. That's the starting point, number one. Number two is, if you can, have a pre-constructed game with them with just the pre-con decks before the tournament. Just have that. If you're a local game store, just have those sleeved up and have your staff members ready to play with people in store. That's certainly what I'm going to be doing over the next couple of weekends once our pre-cons arrive. Then if in terms of convincing people to come in and sit down at that pre-con table or to sign up for that sealed event, if they're people who've played other card games before, you can talk about the similarities with those card games. If they're people who love, as I said before, if they love role-playing games like D&D or wargaming, you can say this is a really cool card game that actually brings in some elements of those things that you love. If they're people who've played something like Magic in particular before, which Sorcery borrows a lot from in terms of its overall feel, I guess, and some of its homages, you can talk about the ways in which Sorcery is similar, but also the ways that it's different. So I think for most Magic players, the mana system is great in terms of how it allows you to play some spells early and some spells late, and you accelerate or you increase in ability to play more powerful spells over the course of the game. So you can't just play your most powerful things at the start. That flow of the game that the mana system creates is really cool. And I think a lot of Magic players like that. What Magic players don't enjoy is the way that the land are shuffled into your deck, and that you can have so many non-games of Magic where just one player doesn't get to play at all. And I think Sorcery solves that really well with the Atlas deck and the Spellbook deck being separate without throwing away a lot of the other good things of Magic. You know, some people say like Fab is great in a lot of ways because it reduces randomness even further than Sorcery. It gets rid of the resource screw, if you like. But it also gets rid of a lot of the other randomness by having you draw so many new cards each turn. So you draw through your deck quite quickly in a game of Fab compared to Magic when you're drawing one card a turn. Sorcery doesn't quite go as far as Fab with reducing randomness. You know, you've still got the randomness of only really drawing one card a turn, so you're probably not going to see your whole spell book in most games, which is a good thing in a way, because the more you reduce randomness, the more the player who's less skilled has no chance to win the game.
Exactly.
So keeping some of those elements of randomness while getting rid of perhaps the most egregious one, which is mana screw that leads to non-games, I think that's a great way to sell it to Magic players.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So how are you going to price this sealed event? Because right now prices are soaring high, and it is an alpha product. So have you thought about where does the price point need to be to get new players in and still not screw your LGS over by selling it too cheaply?
Yeah, it's a decision that, you know, different LGSs are going to have to make based on their business circumstances, I suppose. But for us, you know, we are in a bit of a worse position than the other innkeepers because we actually purchased the Innkeeper pledge secondhand off someone else. So we paid what was an already inflated price, I guess, for in a way. But we're pricing it just based on that, you know, based on our costs. So I think we've set it at, in Australian dollars, it's $80 entry and you get 6 packs. So it's about $12-ish, $12, $13 a pack for just those packs that you're entering, that you're getting for entry. And then we've also got store credit prizes on top of that. So we usually give out, you know, close to the entry fees in store credit as prizes. And then we're giving out the champion cards as well to the top 4. We'll probably give out some of the play bats. So for us, you know, organized play and events like this are really important ways to build the community. It's not about making money. It's about, you know, covering our costs as best we can, but also giving back those prizes and peripherals and other things that get people excited to come to the event. And we'll continue to run drafts as well so we're going to do a fortnightly draft after the original sealed event, which again is a relatively low barrier to entry. Draft is a bit more skill intensive because you obviously have to make a lot more decisions when you're drafting than when you're building a sealed pool. But it's still something that people who've only played a couple of games, particularly when everyone's kind of in the same boat with a brand new game, can just come along and fumble their way through a draft, and it's not a huge deal, especially with Sorcery that doesn't have so many deck building restrictions as something like Fab. So yeah, we'll be running those drafts and we'll just price them the same way. It'll be sort of $13 a pack for the 3 packs that you draft, and then we'll try and give out some of the champion cards and other things as prizes to get people down to those. But yeah, I think that's really, from an LGS perspective, when you're running a new game, it's great that we had those champion cards and those playmats in the Innkeeper kits, because that's what allows us to actually offer that price support and to have them kind of subsidized a little bit in terms of the Innkeeper pricing. And it looks like, we haven't got the details, but it looks like going forward, some of the feedback that me and some of the other LGSs have been giving to the team has been taken on board about further store kits, because it looks like they're going to be announcing some store kits in the second week of July, providing us with some more details on, I think it's the 10th or so, which will be great, because having more of those peripherals, playmats, promos, whatever else they're able to provide, we don't know the details yet. But if those are the sorts of things that are in there, it'll mean that we can price things around product and the cost of product, and then give out these things as bonuses for people who take the time to come into the store and play, which is really what you need to have to build communities, to draw people into the store.
Yeah,
exactly.
Definitely.
That was actually my question number 2, because we know we're getting these store kits at some point. So what do you hope would be within a store kit that would really help grow the community?
Yeah, there are lots of different approaches that different games take based on how they want the experience to feel in the store. And some games offer stores more flexibility as to how they want to hand out whatever's in the kit. Fab is actually, for a very competitive game, quite focused on creating community-based participation, rewarding events in store at the in-store level. So, they say things like, you can't give out the playmats anymore for the overall winners. You have to give out the playmats randomly to participants, those sorts of things. So we might see that philosophy behind the sorcery kits, or they might just say, give them out as your community sees fit. But in terms of what works in the kits, Fantasy Flight Games, which ran Netrunner and Game of Thrones and a range of other games back in the day when they used to have lots of games that had organized play, they would create relatively similar organized play kits every quarter for each of their games. And they would have a range of playmats, some participation promo cards, and then some sort of rarer high end promo cards for the winners, or they'd put a smaller number of some particular promo in the kits as well as a more lucrative prize. So you had something to give out to everyone. You had something either to raffle off or to give out to an overall, quarterly or monthly winner in the playmat. And then you had some kind of rarer promos, which you could give out each week. So that's one model, and that works relatively well. Fab does a monthly kit where they have playmats and promos. And again, they have a more common promo, which is given out as participant prize. And then they have a cold foil, which is a more either a performance-based prize or something that you might give out as a special raffle as well. So yeah, I think that spread of having something to give to everybody is good, so that nobody takes the time to come out to your store and walks away empty-handed. That's kind of a feels bad. So you want to have something to give to everybody. And then also having something either to give away as an extra special raffle creates some excitement, or as a winner's prize is good as well.
Yeah, definitely. So on the topic of the community and sort of starting to grow the game and getting people into it and keeping people interested, Sorcery has already been explained as being a more of a casual game. Do you see some way of you maybe creating a competitive scene if you're players and want that? Is there any way to do that, sort of organize stuff yourself, or would you prefer to see Eric Kiosa, put out some more organized play?
Yeah, it's I think there's been a lot of discussion amongst different people about what is competitive and casual. And I think it's a perennial thing that comes up in most card games. I mean, when I was involved in the Netrunner community, there were lots of people who considered themselves to be casual players who still would come along to weekly events because they still play the game. I mean, it's not a distinction of anyone who goes along to any event in a store ever is competitive and everybody else is casual. I mean, people can enjoy the game without being hard-headed about it. They can come along and let their opponent have lots of take-backs, and they can be really friendly and help new players learn the game, and lend people decks and be that sort of community, bring that community-minded spirit, and still participate in tournaments. So yeah, I think organized play as such is not inherently competitive, and the more that but organized play is very important. If you don't have organized play, and if you don't have people in stores playing the game, especially regularly, and give them, not just have people in playing, but have support for stores to bring people into the store, to make people take the time to leave their house, particularly actually, it's funny enough, after COVID and after lockdowns, a lot more people are used to doing things in their home. So it takes even more to get people out of home into your store play space to play a tournament. So if you don't give stores the tools to do that through the organized play kits or things like that, it's actually really hard to do that. But on the flip side, if you give stores those tools, they can get people in, have a regular player base. And by having a regular player base, you create a buzz in the store. So then people who are walking by see, there's 10 people playing sorcery on a Sunday afternoon. That looks fun. What's that about? They go and ask the people at the counter, or they go and ask the people who are playing, and then maybe they pick up a box, maybe they get into the game, and then they're down at the table the next week. So it's a really important, having regular organized play in stores is a really important way for stores to promote the game, to keep buzz going, and to keep players involved. In terms of the other aspect to it of, do you then have a more competitive circuit, or some irregular competitive tournaments, or even regular competitive tournaments if you want to, the game lends itself really well to that. I mean, we've seen through the league, Yeah, so Ira, who's part of the team at Eric's Curiosa, has been running an online league, and Eric's Curiosa has been providing prizes for that. It's in the Discord. There's links in the Sorcery Discord. It's got its own Discord channel, and it's free to enter. There's these free prizes provided by the company. So I think we had 35 or so players complete the last season, which just finished, which is a great number for a brand new game.
Yeah, definitely.
Taking the time to play through their 8 games or so. And what that's shown is that there is a great amount of diversity. So when we got to the top cut, I think it was a top 16 cut, and there would have been probably 9 or 10 at least different archetypes in that top 16. So it wasn't coalescing around 2 or 3 of the same decks. And there's been some really amazing games. Everyone who's played their top cut games so far has said, wow, that was an awesome match. The top cut matches have been best of 3, the others are best of 1. And I think most of the best of 3 games have been 2-1 results, or at least really close games. So there's the game itself definitely lends itself well to some competitive tournaments of some kind. It's really going to be up to the company as to how much they want to support that, and if they want to support that and in what form. But I think as the game grows, there's definitely enough space to have those more casual based, just organized play tournaments in store, and then something a bit more competitive as well.
That's really cool to hear because, I mean, as someone who hasn't played it yet, it's very hard to sort of suss out, can you actually have some sort of organized play? And also to hear that it seems like there's a fairly nice balance, that you can use a lot of different strategies to actually be competitive, because that's something that you sometimes see, that games aren't really that balanced. And then suddenly, for example, in Fab, you have some, of the heroes that are really, really good, and everybody else is just like getting pummeled, pun intended there.
Literally sometimes, yeah.
Exactly. So another aspect that I'm really interested in hearing, sort of from a store perspective, they've already announced that they're going to do once a yearly sets. Does that work for a store, and how do you sort of keep stirring the pot and keep people interested when they're so far between the sets? Because I like the idea, but I also think that maybe it could be amended to maybe 2 sets per year, because that might be a little more easy to handle. But what's your take on that?
Yeah, it's something that a lot of players like from the perspective of not having to buy lots of different products. I get that.
Yeah.
But from a store perspective, that means people buy fewer products too. That's fine. Stores, there's a trade-off there, and there's an equilibrium to be found somewhere. You don't want people being forced to spend heaps of money all the time, even though that would be great for stores, because that's just not a great experience for players. So you got to find the middle ground there. Really, I think from a player perspective, whilst there are positives to not having to buy products so frequently, there are actually some real downsides to having products be too infrequent. Not just that metagames can get stale, because when we talk about products, like, it's apples and oranges as well. You can have a set that's 100 cards, or you can have a set that's 400 cards. Obviously, a 400 card set is going to have more depth, and it's going to last longer in terms of being solved. It's going to have a longer shelf life in terms of how much enjoyment people can get out of solving it. So if they make one larger set, that's better than making one small or medium-sized set a year. But you're still going to have that problem, I think, of a bit of stagnation. Things become a bit samey. People drop off. You lose interest from people in your community. And once that starts to gather speed, it can become really hard to arrest that decline and to get people back. It's much easier for people to create habits and to enjoy coming back every week than to come in for a couple of months, then take 6 months off, then start coming in again. You're always going to have attrition and lose people if you have it that way. And I think I just note briefly on that, Uprising was a really good example of this for Fab. It was far too long from Uprising to the next draftable set, which was Outsiders. And Legend Story Studios, I think, has acknowledged this, that it was a real problem with how stale that became for drafts. At our LGS, by the end of it, people were just like, I just can't draft Uprising once more. Like, it's so boring. I just don't want to. And when people get to that point, it's not great for the game. So I would hate to see Sorcery get to that point where you come to the last 3 months, or even the last 6 months of that period, and people are sick of it and they want something new. I hope they can find a way to please the people who want infrequent releases whilst also not allowing that to happen.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, I can also see it from like Eric's perspective. It's also hard to keep that balance because what do you do? Do you just, up the frequency, or can you do some sort of like mini set that is so meta relative that it shakes things up? Or yeah, it's a difficult thing to navigate.
I mean, one thing that Fantasy Flight Games actually did well is that they kind of designed their sets and then split them into 6 and released them as 6 starter packs. And I mean, that worked for living card games in the sense that it was much easier for them to sell packs to people as packs of 20 cards. Like you got a play set of 20 different cards. So like 60 cards, 3 of each of the 20 in each starter pack. But the 6 starter packs together in a cycle were effectively just one big set that was split into 6 pieces. So it doesn't have to be split into 6. And of course, if you're designing booster pack products, you need to have a critical mass of things in each set for your booster packs to function properly. I've seen with March the Machine, the Aftermath, it doesn't really work when you've got 50 cards as a pool to draw from for your booster pack. But there is probably middle ground there. Magic does it with smaller sets of that are a bit larger than Aftermath, where you might have 150 cards in the set, and so you can still create good booster packs with that amount of cards. So if Sorcery was to do something like, you design Arthurian Legends, but you release Arthurian Legends Part 1 and then Arthurian Legends Part 2, yes, some players might say, oh, you're making me buy 2 products, that's really annoying. But it also lets you have 6 months with Arthurian Legends Part 1 and enjoy the game in that period, and then have a slightly different game once Part 2 comes out. And that's kind of good from a player perspective too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and also, all these deck builders out there just likes to get new cards and think out new great ways to combine them. And that really gives us, something to work with and have fun with. And yeah, also it makes the meta not go too stale also. So I think that's a really good point actually. So, but it sounds like that Sorcery is actually kind of balanced, and there's a lot of ways to build decks, and there's a lot of great decks out there. So could you imagine that having one big set a year, like the alpha set, something like that, once a year, if it's the same size and it's the same, sort of balance in play, could that work too?
Yeah, it could. To come back to the Uprising example, Uprising was probably not the best fab set. Both from a classic constructed perspective, there had to be some bans pretty quickly after it came out in terms of the fire side of things. Dromai hasn't. It's worked out to some extent, but it didn't really work out initially as a deck that was competitive. And Icelander had a pretty negative reception, but also the 3-way draft format didn't really work. So there were other issues with that product design, but having it be the only draftable set for such a long period, as I said, was not great. So I guess the question is, if you had a product that was slightly larger than Uprising, a bit more diverse, and a bit more balanced, I guess, would that work for 12 months? I still don't think so. Like, I still think without something to shake things up, without something new, even you kind of go, well, everyone's excited about receiving their alpha boxes now. We're all going to be excited still for beta. That's still just a couple of months down the road. And there's lots of people who couldn't get as much alpha as they wanted or didn't get any, who are really excited about the game. So fantastic, to get into beta. But in 8 months' time after beta, are people still going to be excited to go into the store and draft beta and pick up a box of beta? Probably not. They still might be, but you're not going to get the same numbers. You're not going to get the same number of people who are. So really, it's just how excited do you want people to be about coming into the store and being involved in the game? If you want them to be more excited, I think you probably need to have a product that comes out a little sooner than 12 months.
Yeah. Speaking of having people excited, how much excitement is there, outside of these closed Kickstarter circles? Are people that have not backed the Kickstarter actually coming into your store and saying, what about that Sorcery? Is it coming soon?
Yeah, so we've definitely had, it's hard to know who's already in the tent and who's not when you get random phone calls and emails. We've had people contacting the store, quite a few emails of people, because we, let people know that we were an Innkeeper. We got listed on the Sorcery website as an Innkeeper store on one of the LGSs that'll be carrying it. So after that happened, we definitely had a few email inquiries and people asking whether we're going to be selling our boxes. But they could well have been people who had already pledged and backed and just wanted to get more boxes. We've put our tickets up for the alpha pre-release event, and I think we've already sold 10 or so, which is great. I mean, that shows that even in our local city, I'm not sure that there were that many more than 10 people who pledged for the Kickstarter, to be honest, in Melbourne. I mean, maybe there were. I think there was, from memory, about 400 or 500 people in Australia, and Melbourne's the second biggest city. So, there might have been quite a few people who pledged here. But the fact that we've already sold some tickets for an event that's now pretty much a month and a half away, like it's still 6 weeks away. We sold, those 10 tickets in probably the first 3 or 4 days after we put the event up. Just shows that people are pretty excited. And I think we'll, hopefully, with more people being able to be exposed to the game in store, like we haven't even had our product arrive yet. So once I'm in store, playing the game on the tables, showing it to people, demoing it, I'm confident that we'll get up, closer to 50 or 60 people coming for a release event, which would be pretty cool for a brand new game. So yeah, I'm not too worried about that. We've got that decent community of people who are invested at least a little bit, and I'm sure some of them from the Kickstarter in Melbourne will want to actually play the game. I hope not everyone's just going to go and sell their boxes. We don't know, but I think they will. I think there'll be a few people who are excited to open and at least play. At least collect, if not play.
Yeah, definitely. So, okay, that might be a tricky question, but you are getting an Innkeeper pledge, which is a lot of boxes, and right now prices have definitely changed from what they were when we all pledged on Kickstarter. Have you talked about also keeping the boxes at somewhat close to cost, or how do you feel about that? Because potentially people could also buy them relatively cheaply and then go straight to eBay to auction them off for a higher price. So how do you make sure that you are being good to your community, but also securing some financial, security for the LGS? Do you have a good answer to that? Because I think that must be pretty difficult.
Yeah, so our plan for that is that we'll only be selling booster packs at our events.
Yeah, that's a
and
great
we'll
idea.
only allow people to buy a small number for each event. So for the sealed pre-release or the release event that we're having, each player is going to have the capacity to buy 6 packs at the same price. They have $13 a pack that they paid for entry. And if they take that up, they can. If they don't, then that opportunity's passed, and we'll just hold them on for the next draft and for the future drafts that we do. The stores only get from those Innkeeper pledges, a few cases. And if between running sealed events, running drafts, and potentially giving out some prizes and selling a few packs to players, you burn through those pretty quickly. I mean, I think if we end up with, I was doing the math, I think we've got with sort of 50 players, and each of them both does the sealed pool and then buys 6 packs each, we're probably going to go through, I think, 3 cases or something. That's a fair amount of our amount that we got. So yeah, we have to be a bit stingy with the product in terms of how much we allow people to buy, and very deliberate about who's buying it, so that we're trying to give it to people who are actually interested in playing and being a part of the community.
That's a great answer. I mean, that's not something I had thought of, but I really like that, because you're sort of rewarding the people who want to grow the community, who want to play and want to experience the product, and at the same time not letting them buy up everything. So that's a great idea. And also, as you say, that will get you pretty far into your case amount if you're just having a lot of people playing and you need some prizes and stuff as well. That's really cool. That's a great way to, I think, ensure that the product goes to the right people, so to speak. So personally, you have been building a lot of decks and you're posting a lot of great gameplay content. I'm always referring people to your channel if they want to know about gameplay. What is your favorite avatar and why?
I think it's probably hard to go past Battle Mage for me at the moment. It's got a soft spot in my heart. I think it unsettles people. When people first start learning the game, they, I think, like to sit on their side of the board and build things up over time. And as a Battle Mage, you just get right over there in their face straight away, and it's kind of get a bit flustered about it. So that's fun. But it's also, Death Speaker would be a close second for me. Yeah, I just really like I've always enjoyed sort of graveyard interaction strategies in other games, and Death Speaker does that in a really cool way, I think. So yeah, that would be second for me.
Yeah. Is there a game mechanic that you sort of want to take out from another TCG and put into Sorcery? Is there something that you think, oh, if they added that, that would be so cool and would really elevate the gameplay?
One thing that I hope they add at some point is Trample from Magic,
Yeah.
because I think the game does have the capacity to... Large minions aren't necessarily that good because small minions can block or defend the entire attack of a large minion, and the small minions are much cheaper, and also removal spells can obviously get rid of large minions as well. So it's something that in Magic, if you're playing big expensive creatures, you either need them to have an immediate impact or to have some kind of evasion. And in Sorcery, there are a lot more minions that have immediate impacts. There are lots of things that have Genesis abilities, so that's great. But it'd be nice to diversify that large minion pool a little bit and have things that don't necessarily do things on the turn they arrive, but are more likely to be impactful if they're allowed to stay around for a few turns. And I think Trample is a Trample-like mechanic is a really good way to make it harder for your opponent to just jump block you all day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
It's a bit of a boring example. Sorry, I could have come up with a bit more of a
No,
flashy
no,
mechanic.
It's
But
really
yeah.
cool. But do you think that it lacks right now the gameplay, the ability to sort of have a longer impact with your creatures? Is that part of it, or is it just something that you think would be really fun?
I think a lot of minions, it's hard to stick minions to the board, which is another reason I really like Battle Mage. That they can't get rid of the Battle Mage. So
Yeah.
they're just going to keep taking 3 a turn, and they have to beat that clock. So that's, there's definitely that dynamics there. And as I said, all the things that have an impact as they come into the board are stronger. And that's another reason why Grapple Shot is really strong, because as you get later into the game, you can play a minion and then Grapple Shot it on the same turn. So it's effectively giving it haste and evasion, because Grapple Shot also lets your minion strike a particular target on the target site, so they can't
Yeah.
defend it. So Grapple Shot is, I guess, the current version of the trample effect that I'm talking about. But it's also got mobility built in, and it's just way too good. So I think Grapple Shot is going to be addressed a little bit. And if we take that out of the picture, if you took Grapple Shot out of the game, it would definitely be harder for minions to have an impact than they do now. And I think it would be better to have other non-Grapple Shot alternatives to help minions, have an impact over the longer game, particularly larger minions.
Yeah, definitely. So you were talking in the beginning about having, a content creator side as well. How have people responded to the sorcery content thus far? Because it takes a while to sort of build up an audience for a new game, because people are coming to your channel to see something specific. So how have people reacted to the viewers that are not necessarily coming to the channel for sorcery?
Yeah, it's always nerve-wracking, when you're, as you guys know, when you're creating content, how are people going to respond to something new and different, especially if I'm kind of stopping doing something that I was doing before. So I've made a lot of fab content throughout 2021 and 2022, and I've stopped doing that on the channel. So obviously some people who are just interested in fab will move on. But I think I've had some really good comments from people who I know from fab who got into the channel through fab, who are also really excited about sorcery. So that's been really heartening. And I think also the sorcery community being relatively small and relatively new and very welcoming and positive. You guys are a great example of that, but I'm sure you found that as well from other content creators and other people. People have been really supportive of the content as well, including the Eric's Curiosa team. They jump on and Ira always gives their comments on my gameplay videos and my league videos and sends me messages about those, which I really appreciate. And the others are always there and thereabouts as well, Chase and Simon and the others. So yeah, there's been lots of great feedback and lots of things that have kept me going in terms of the sorcery content, and all those things matter. everybody's likes and comments and things, that those ways that viewers can give feedback, they're always meaningful as a content creator.
Yeah, definitely. And it's always nice to get some good feedback and have a good discussion in the comment section. I mean, at least for us, that's the really fun part. That's engaging down the comment section and hearing what people thought, or maybe them bringing up some new ideas you haven't thought about. So that's really cool. And it is really cool also to see the team in the chats, in the live chats, engaging and, just really having a finger on the pulse on what's going on in the community. But what do you think that the team behind Sorcery could do to sort of engage or maybe even use their content creators? Because Fab, and they have a lot of stuff going on with their content creators. Would you like to see Sorcery and the team behind it do something similar?
Yeah, I think what they did with the booster packs for Alpha was great. That was really cool. It gave people a lot of excitement. It felt like a really great way for the game to give back and the company to give back to people who are taking the time to make content. So I think things like that in the future would be great. And other ways to support content creators, whether it's giving people preview cards, that's obviously a really great thing to do. And I strongly encourage them to do that in the future, to choose preview cards that obviously suit people's either playstyle or channel or interests.
Yeah.
That could be a really great way to make content creators feel special and give them something great to make content about. And any giveaways that they can provide, Fab provides the promos every now and then. They've done a couple of those content creator appreciation kits where each content creator gets a bunch of promos that they can send out to their viewers in whatever way they see fit. That's just a great way to support channels, because running a channel is like, running a small community, a business that's not really ever going to make much money. But, a labor of love, if you like. And any way that the games can support creators to be able to give something of value to their supporters and to people who are going to or are willing to provide some kind of financial support. I think Fab's done that really well. They sort of do it on a system, in a way of saying to creators, look, we don't want you to just turn around and sell these on eBay or something. And if we see that, then we're just not going to give them to you again. But what we are happy for you to do is give it to people who support your channel financially, or say use it as an incentive for people to support you, because we know that what you're doing most of the time is spending your time at financial cost making content about our game. And that's just a really great thing to do, I think, for the game company.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I mean, sorcery is still so new, so it's still sort of moving into what can we do? How can we help people? How can we sort of help each other out? Because all of us content creators are super excited about the game and we really want to talk about it and engage about it, but it is always at cost, because it's just, you're using a lot of time, and we love to do that. But any sort of, incentive or help we could get with promo cards, that would, of course, be really, really cool. I completely agree.
It just makes you feel a bit nicer. I mean, you guys have got kids. You've got lots of things that you could be doing with your time, but you're passionate about the game, and it's really cool that you take the time to make the content. So, the little tokens of appreciation can really matter.
Yeah, definitely.
It really does. So we know that Sorcery, we're being negative Nancy here at the end. So we know that Sorcery has been delayed a couple of times. Has that had any kind of impact on your LGS?
Yeah, I think the main impact has been that we were hoping to have a bit more time with just alpha before beta turned up to get people, excited and enjoying that. I mean, it's not the end of the world. In some ways, having beta be closer is good, because as people get into the game and new people come into the game, it means that it's not so far away that they can actually purchase their own product on a larger scale. If they say, I want to get a case of boxes and build some constructed decks, at the moment we just can't offer that with the amount of alpha products we have. So once we get the beta delivery, we can. So in that sense, it's been good, but it's also obviously financially, for any store that's bought product, if any person that's bought product, the longer that your money is there and you're not getting any of it, any return on any of it, or getting any of it back, or any of the product to actually sell, the further in advance you pre-order something and have to pay for it, obviously that cash flow is sitting there. So, for Innkeeper stores who might have quite a bit sitting, or stores who've bought even more than just the Innkeeper pledge, who have quite a bit of money sitting tied up in that they can't recover anything from, because they can't run any events or do anything with that product until it arrives. That obviously creates cost, and additional cost the more time that goes by. So that has been a little bit of a frustration for us, but we're now at the point where looking at our tracking, hopefully the pledge will arrive tomorrow. So, when you're this close, it feels a lot better. When you're still in the land of sometime soon, it's a lot more stressful.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we've been talking a bit about, the interest from the community, and we know that beta is coming really soon. So how all in are you at the beta? How much have you ordered to
So we are offering beta pre-orders through our store already. So I think at the moment we're one of the only stores who sort of put our hands up before the main distribution came around. So we got in touch with Eric directly and had a chat about that, and we've got those pre-orders up on our website. So that's been great. But ultimately for us, it's not about we don't want to be one store in Melbourne. It's nice to be the only store that's selling things from a financial perspective, you would think, because you have a monopoly on it. But ultimately that's actually a bad thing, because you want more stores to be selling it, you want the game to grow, you want players to be enjoying it. So we are actually really excited about the 10th of July rolling around, and hopefully some of our other game stores who we're friends with, some of the other game store owners who we know, some of whom are Innkeeper pledges as well, having the opportunity to order an amount through distribution in a way that they're comfortable with, to then be able to offer those pre-orders and sell that product themselves and grow their own local communities. And we'll be, working with the other store owners who we're in touch with to try and encourage them to do that and spread our knowledge about the game, because our view on things, I think it's reflected in the way that our store is structured, with so many people being involved, is that, a rising tide lifts all boats, and we don't want, whether it's in a particular game or in terms of gaming generally, we're not competing with other stores. We want everyone to be able to grow their local communities and have lots more players and have growth in terms of people coming in and enjoying things. So that's our approach.
That's a great philosophy.
Yeah, definitely. And also in terms of content creation, we're really, trying to, grow a community of content creators as well, and sort of pointing to different people and going, hey, we're not good at this, so check out this channel, because it really helps that people feel that there's like a well-rounded amount of content creators you can go to. And I mean, there's so much to learn about sorcery, so it's really great to have a lot of people doing different like subjects within the game. So we know that we're going to get alpha any moment now. There's going to be a beta, then we're going to have Arthurian Legends revised at some point, and we know that Ed Beard Jr. has some sort of small mini dragon set. But what would you personally love to see as the set after that? What do you want to see as a theme or mechanic or anything like that?
It's a great question. I think one thing that Netrunner did really well was take different locations in the Earth and the world, in the cyberpunk universe that it was set in, and depict those in really interesting ways. So whether it was locations in Africa or locations in Southeast Asia or different cultures, and representing them in a authentic, unique, and an interesting way within a cyberpunk universe. And I think there's a way that you could do something. I mean, that cyberpunk is a setting that's based in Earth, whereas obviously with Sorcery Contested Realm, it's a fantasy realm, fantasy world, so it doesn't have that link to the geographical locations that we have on Earth. So I don't know whether something like that would be possible rather to do in a sort of culturally appropriate, interesting way. But yeah, that was something I liked about Netrunner. But in terms of other settings, I mean, sorcery doesn't always have to be a fantasy game. You could have potentially sci-fi aspects to it. I don't know. That's not something that I would necessarily like, though. I think I like the fantasy setting of it and the generic fantasy setting. So I'd probably like to see it sort of stay in that realm. I don't know. I hadn't given it all that much thought. whether there's a particular sort of skin or theme or something you'd want to put on it. I'm looking back through Magic sets in my head and just, you could really, I think, as the game develops and grows, having sets that are themed around a particular story or event becomes more compelling. I think for the alpha set, just like it was for alpha MTG, having the generic fantasy and just lots of different things going on that you make up your own story about in the way Eric's described, I think in other interviews is great. But as you go on, Arthurian Legends has a story to it, and the cards are going to be themed around that story. And I think attaching future sets to other stories or events or, struggles that have a bit of a narrative to them is probably a good way to go.
Yeah, definitely. We're about to go into a video like later this week where we sort of, maybe parse out what kind of mythologies and themes are already in alpha and then where we could go from that. So that's going to be a bit of fun to just sort of like look through the entire set of alpha and figure out what's what. But yeah, there's a lot of great places to go. But I think this is going to be rounding off. So is there anything you have coming up or anything that you would like people to know that you're doing right now that you want to plug here at the end?
Well, I've just got my hands on, from a local player, even though my pledge hasn't arrived, a box of alpha. Can't quite see that. It's getting blurred out by the background. But so I'm going to be opening that this evening, and I'll have the video up on my channel later. So yeah, if you are interested in a box opening, I'm going to talk a little bit about, I think there have been some crazy market values being placed on some different cards on the secondary market. So I'm going to try and bring a little bit of sanity to that conversation with some maths alongside opening this box. So if you're interested in that conversation, come along and check that out on my channel. It'll probably be up by the time this interview is up as well. But that's what's coming up for me.
Cool. We will definitely go check out that video as soon as it's up. Jesse, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure having this small discussion, and we would love to do it again some other time if you're up for it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time, both of you. I really appreciate it. It was a really great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, viewer, for watching it. And hopefully you'll hit the like button and consider subscribing because we have more fun and engaging interviews coming up. I am just going to end the